Welcome to Leading Change in Practice. I am Madhav, and today I'm speaking with Mr. Adam Bosnian, who served as Executive Vice President of Sales and Marketing at CyberArk, about leading large scale change inside a fast growing cybersecurity company as it went from less than 5 million to 100 million USD in revenue. CyberArk became a global leader in identity and privileged access security and was acquired by Palo Alto Networks in February 2026 in a $25 billion deal, a milestone that shows how important central identity security has become in today's cybersecurity environment. But behind major milestones are major internal transformations. Today, we are focusing on one specific change effort, the creation of the sales team during the early rapid revenue growth. At CyberArk, senior leadership led the rollout of this new platform to modernize identity, protection, and support growth. The biggest challenge was existing leadership, previous experiences and methods, as well as existing personal roles and positions. This matters because in rapidly emerging organizations, change has to happen just as rapidly and be supported throughout the organization from executive leadership, all the way down to the newest employees. To analyze this change, I will use two frameworks: Lewin's three-stage model, which is unfreeze, change, and refreeze, and the ADKAR model, which is awareness, desire, knowledge, ability, and reinforcement. Lewin helps us understand the organizational transition, whereas ADKAR helps us understand the individual adoption for the change. Mr. Adam, welcome to the portion.
Thank you very much. I'm very glad to be here.
Thank you. The first question is, when you joined CyberArk and joined sales in early stages, what was the biggest resistance you faced from executive leadership and existing personnel?
It's a great question. When I joined the company had been around for many years, probably about 5 years, and had reached about the $4 million in sales, had hit a ceiling and had bounced off. And when I joined, the belief was that bouncing off and not going past the 4 million in sales was due to poor salesmanship and was the fault of sales. And because of that, there was almost a cultural belief that sales was not doing their job, that they were coin operated, and that they were the ones that were failing the technology leadership that the company believed that they had at the time.
Thank you.
Go
Thank you
ahead.
so much for the response. So, how did you change urgency for the change?
Yeah, I think that there were two elements to it. Number one, I had to really work on helping to address the culture, both at that executive leadership, of which I was a part. I had joined the executive leadership, but really change or help to change the culture, both at the executive leadership within the company and at the board level, while also working with the existing personnel to help them, be ready for the change. But I think the key underneath all of this was there was a very simple belief that happens in many technology startups that if we have great technology, then the market will buy it. And that there's magic that happens in the middle that kind of happens on its own because the technology is so darn good. And the reality is that's not the case. If you don't understand your market, understand your buyers, understand who your competitors are, and are really able to articulate what your values are, it doesn't matter how good the technology is, the people who may want to buy it will never hear that message. And so I had really two different things that I wanted to work on. Number one was work on what I call setting the playing field on which the game will be played. That is really product market fit. And number two, really elevating the importance and the understanding of the importance of sales and marketing within the organization, that those are not, lower than and less valuable than technology, but really maybe as important, if not more important, once we get that good product market fit. And working on both of those things at the same time, I think is what ultimately allowed us to be successful, both in those early days as well as over the next 15 or 20 years.
Thank you so much. Adding on to that answer, so what were the one or two major things to affect the change?
So number one, I really needed to work to educate the existing executive leadership and people on the board because the board was very, very involved at the time. And they had been hearing for many years that the reason the company was not successful was not a product issue, it was not a technology issue, is because those darn salespeople were no good. And the result of that was that they were hiring almost in a revolving door type of environment. They would hire a salesperson who probably wasn't a very great salesperson, but because the company had a bad reputation for sales, not a lot of people wanted to join. So they were really, recruiting probably lower than average salespeople, number one. They weren't treating them very well. And when they were not successful, then they would get rid of them very quickly, right? So I needed to really start to work on, hey, let's understand the importance of sales and that it is not a sales problem. It is really understanding that we need to get a product and market fit first before we can focus on bringing on the right salespeople. You can have the greatest salesperson in the world. If you don't understand your product and how it fits within the market, it is extremely hard to sell. And yet a lot of startups are looking for that unicorn that can take their idea and sell it to anybody. And they exist, but that's really not the most effective way to get things done. So I needed to work on, first of all, lowering the temperature on how bad salespeople are, kind of changing the belief on that and working both at the board level and the executive leadership level. And then number two, work really hard at finding that product market fit. As we did that, what you found is that we had little wins where before, they were really kind of shooting, shotgun style, kind of trying to hope, if we go everywhere at once, we'll get one deal. And instead, what we really needed to understand is the more we get that product market fit, the more we get a repeatable sales cycle. And we understand what it is we're selling, what our messages are, who we're selling them to, how we do it, how long it takes, et cetera. And as we started to be able to build that repeatable sales cycle, we got a lot of confidence building at the executive leadership, like, hey, we're onto something. And then we were able to go talk to higher quality salespeople and say, hey, look, we have a repeatable sales cycle. We would like you to come on board and start to implement our repeatable sales cycle and help us understand how to do it even better. And so now you had both sides working together and saying, hey, we think we have something good going on here. This is exciting. How do we do more of it?
That's a great answer. I really liked how you mentioned that it's really important to focus on people and sales, and how it was important to focus on the sales team instead of just focusing on technology. Because if you don't know how to sell, even if you have the best product in the world, you can't sell it. It was a great
I
insight.
couldn't agree more. I couldn't agree.
So, how did you and the other leaders explain why these changes were important and mattered?
When you're in a small company, a lot of times what you're really talking about is an existential crisis. Now, fear, there's a lot of elements to that, but to your point, right, there's fear of the company no longer being around. Well, there's fear of loss of your position, of your role, of your money, fear of losing face, fear of losing, how you look in the outside world. All of those fears come together to really motivate you. And to be brutally honest, I had all of those fears myself because I had worked in a lot of small companies, not all of them successful. And I was at a stage in my career where I needed to help be part of a successful organization, right? And so we all have those fears that motivate us, and it's a wonderful motivator. Just not always the most constructive, but it can be very productive. Yeah,
Now
very much so.
moving now moving to the next question. So, what communication approach worked best? Was it town halls, smaller groups meetings, or one-on-one meetings?
Sure. It's a really important question because it's not any one of them, it's all of them together, right? I think one of the things that I learned in all of the smaller companies that I worked in is that there's a lot of ways that companies are not successful. And I think a lot of them boil down to internal misalignment. The board is not aligned with the management team. The management team is not aligned with themselves. The management team is not aligned with their employees, and that there are internal battles that take a lot of energy and a lot of effort and a lot of willpower, if that's the right word. And I find all of those to be not of value because, in my mind, all of our energies need to be focused outside, need to be focused on our competitors, on getting customers, on doing those types of things. So when you have a company that's not well aligned internally, I think it's very hard for that company to be successful. So one of the key things I think we had to do was to exhibit that alignment. First, build that alignment, make sure everyone bought in, and doing that at the board.
Now, talking about the measurement of performance and monitoring of change. So the next question is, how did you measure the real adoption and ensure that people were not just checking the box?
Yeah. So, I'm talking about a company probably about 20 years ago. Okay. This is in, 20 years ago. But even then, if I got a phone call on my desktop phone or on my cell phone from a number that I didn't know, I wouldn't answer it. Right. First of all, if you were calling my desktop phone, you were already the wrong person because I didn't use my desktop phone. Right. And my cell phone, if it was a number I didn't know, I didn't respond. I responded to email. Text wasn't really being used in sales that much at the time. But you understand my point. Today, we never answer the phone unless we know who it's coming from. Right. So we had an inside sales team that their goal, almost in a traditional sense, was to reach out to suspects, we'll call them, people that should be interested in what we're doing, and give them phone calls. And the numbers we had were their desktop phones. And we were inviting them to come in person, not webinars. We were inviting them to come in person to events. Now, I didn't think any of that would work. I hoped it would work. I was a marketing executive and seen that work in the past, but I kind of thought it had moved past that. I thought we need to do a lot more e-marketing, if you will, right? Do everything by email. I think the metric that surprised us the most was we didn't get one or two people to come to these events. We got tens, 30s, 50s. We at one point got over 100 people to these events. So the metric of dialing really surprised us that the amount of dials turned into real conversations, turned to people actually showing up. Now, was it because of the skill of the salespeople? Maybe. Was it because of their diligence and their discipline? Maybe. I think all of those are part and parcel. But it goes back to what I also talked about earlier. We had product market fit. We knew what the product did. We knew where it fit. We knew what the drivers were. We had evidence that people needed it. So we would talk about all of those things. And then when you say that to someone, they're like, yeah, you're right. I probably need to know more about this. Sure, I'll spend a half hour on my lunchtime to go hear what you guys have to say. And we start to see those metrics of in-person event attendance. Shocked the heck out of me. Never thought it would happen. But it was evidence that what we were doing was paying off. There was something here. So let's do more of it.
Thank you. Thank you so much for your response. Now, last but not the least. So, when we look back, was there any leadership move that most reduced resistance?
That reduced the resistance, right? Was there a leadership move that removed the resistance? I think the biggest thing that changed, aside from all the stuff I talked about, product market fit and communication, et cetera, there was an attitudinal change at the senior leadership and at the board level that sales was a positive thing, that salespeople were really valuable. Maybe because a lot of them were very technical people, maybe not as important as the most important engineer. I grant you that, right? But they understood that there was real value in having and investing in quality salespeople, sales teams, and even sales compensation. So that change, I think, really was felt not just by the people who were already inside the company, but we could also use to attract new people who, when they heard about the company, said, hey, I hear you guys don't have a really good environment. salespeople kind of are run through very quickly, et cetera. And I'm like, actually, no, this is how it is. We have new folks here. This is what we're doing. And that is not the case. If you have any questions, I'd be glad to get you 5 minutes with our CEO and you can hear it from him. Right. And so now we had that resistance almost removed. When you add on top of it, our product was selling, the market was expanding. Now people were coming to us and wanting to join CyberArk. And so now we had a different dialogue. So we removed that resistance by success, but that success was born of alignment, product market fit, the right attitude, the right communication, and it worked. Very fortunate.
Mr. Adam, thank you. That was extremely insightful. Now, I will briefly analyze this change using the two frameworks. First, Lewin's three-stage model. The first stage is unfreeze. When you mentioned that resistance from executive leadership and existing personnel, it showed how people were comfortable with prior methods. In early stage companies, founders and early employees often rely on what initially worked for them. To unfreeze the organization, leadership had to create urgency and show that the old approach would not sustain growth from $5 million to $100 million in revenue. That shift in mindset was critical. The second stage is change. This is where new structures, sales processes, and performance expectations were introduced. Mr. Adam discussed communication, alignment, and structured implementation. This reflects Lewin's idea that change requires active transition, new behaviors, new systems, and new accountability. The third stage is refreeze. Once the new sales structure proved effective, it had to become the new normal. Metrics, performance tracking, and leadership reinforcement helped stabilize the new model so the organization did not revert to informal early stage practices. Now, looking through the ADKAR model at the individual level. So, awareness was created by clearly communicating why scaling required new systems and leadership approaches. Then, desire was built by showing employees how the change would enable growth, stability, and long term success. Knowledge came from training, clearer sales processes, and defined expectations. Ability developed as the teams practiced within the new structure and received support. And reinforcement came through performance metrics, accountability, and leadership consistency. It helps us to see that change succeeds only when individuals move through each stage, not just when leadership announces a new direction. One limitation of both models in high growth environments is that startups operate in continuous change. This is rarely a stable refreeze change. Instead, organizations may move from one transformation to the next, which can create fatigue if not managed carefully. Based on this analysis, there are five short recommendations. First, define urgency clearly. Leadership should clearly explain why scaling requires structural change. Measure alignment through leadership communication consistency. Second, aligned, align incentives with new behaviors. Sales compensation and performance metrics should reinforce the new structure. Measure adoption through revenue predictability and pipeline accuracy. Third, use small wins to build credibility. Pilot new processes before full rollout. Measure early performance improvements. Fourth, invest in frontline managers. They translate strategy into daily behavior. They measure team level consistency. Fifth, conduct structured reflection after major growth milestones to prepare for the next stage of scaling. The key takeaway is this: in high growth companies, change is not optional, it is survival. But growth alone does not guarantee successful transformation. What makes the difference is leadership clarity, behavioral reinforcement, and alignment between strategy and daily execution. Mr. Adams' experience shows that scaling revenue requires scaling mindset, structure, and accountability at the same time. And thank you for listening to Leading Change in Practice. Thank you again to Mr. Adam Bosnian for sharing his experience leading change at CyberArk during a critical growth phase for the company. If you found this valuable, feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. Thank you for listening.
Thank you.